Hello, everyone. Tonight we are not in a hurry, not scrolling, not skipping. We're just here, together, sitting in a moment that asks nothing of us, except to listen, to feel, to breathe in someone else's story for a little while. Outside my window, the rain taps gently against the glass. The kind of rain that makes everything quiet, like the world is holding its breath. And inside this stillness, I want to tell you something personal. But before we begin, if you find comfort in these slow stories, if you enjoy peeling back the layers of life with me, then maybe, just maybe, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep doing what I love. But only if you really feel it. And while you're here, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. Because I like to imagine you out there, maybe with tea, maybe under a blanket, maybe just needing a moment to feel not so alone. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan to have some soft background music, and let's start our journey tonight. This is a story about love, about promises made under a soft sky, and the silence that came after they were broken. It begins not in heartbreak, but in something far more dangerous, hope. I still remember the moment we met. Not the kind of memory that fades at the edges, but the kind that lingers. Sharp, vivid, like it was etched into the back of my mind with care. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, the kind of day where the sky can't decide whether to rain or hold back. I had ducked into the old bookstore near campus, half out of habit, half out of loneliness. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, maybe something to distract me. Maybe just a quiet place to be invisible for a while. But there he was, standing at the end of the aisle. Dark jeans, soft brown hair that curled a little too much around his ears, and a navy scarf like something out of a movie. He wasn't doing anything dramatic, just flipping through a book. The kind no one reads unless they're looking for something deeper. I noticed his hands first, steady, slow, like he was really reading. Not just pretending to look busy. Then he looked up, and our eyes met. Not long, but long enough that I had to look away. I didn't expect to see him again. I wasn't the type of girl stories are written about. I didn't believe in fate, didn't believe in meant to be. But then, a few minutes later, I turned into another aisle, and there he was again. We both reached for the same book, our fingers brushed, just lightly, and we both laughed, that awkward, accidental kind of laugh, but it cracked something open. "You have good taste," he said. I smiled. Guess we have that in common. From there, it was like gravity. We talked without trying, about books, music, how we both hated Sundays but loved early mornings. He told me his name was Caleb. He didn't ask for my number, didn't make a move. He just said, "I hope I see you again." And then, he left. But somehow, even before I turned back toward the exit, I already knew I would see him again. Because sometimes you don't need time to know someone is going to matter. He wasn't like the rest. You know how sometimes people talk and talk, but it feels like they're just filling space? Not him. Every word Caleb spoke felt intentional, like he wasn't trying to impress me, like he wasn't performing. He listened, really listened, like he was storing every little detail, not because he had to, but because he wanted to remember. We saw each other again, just 2 days later. Same bookstore, same time. He smiled when he saw me, like it was exactly what he'd hoped for. This time, he brought 2 cups of coffee. No sugar in mine. Somehow, he'd remembered. We sat on the floor between shelves of old travel books, the smell of paper and cinnamon in the air. He asked about my favorite cities, what kind of person I thought I'd be in a different life, and whether I believed in second chances. I told him I wasn't sure. I hadn't had many first ones. He didn't flinch, didn't try to fix it. He just nodded, as if that answer was enough. There was something calming about him, the way he made silence feel like a safe space, not something that needed to be filled. But there was also something distant, like a part of him was always holding back. Not cold, just cautious. I noticed it when I asked where he was from. He hesitated, smiled, but only with his mouth. "Upstate," he said. Then changed the subject. It didn't feel like lying, but it wasn't the truth either. Still, I let it go, because in those moments, he made me feel seen, and that felt rare enough to protect. We started seeing each other once a week, then twice, then almost every day. And each time, I'd think, this is what it's supposed to feel like. No games, no pretending. Just two people finding their way toward each other without even realizing they'd started walking. But in the quiet corners of my mind, something small started whispering. Something about the way he looked over his shoulder before he kissed me in public. Something about how his phone would buzz and he'd turn the screen face down. I ignored it, because when someone holds your heart so gently, you don't expect them to ever drop it. But love, even the softest kind, can still break you. We kept our love quiet. Not because we were hiding anything, at least that's what I told myself. But looking back now, maybe we were always hiding. Everything. There was a kind of magic in the secrecy at first, meeting in tucked-away cafes, passing notes instead of texts, waiting until the last customer left the bookstore before he'd reach for my hand. It felt like a secret language, like we existed in our own little world, one no one else could touch. But slowly, I started to wonder, why didn't he want anyone to see us? He never introduced me to his friends. He never talked about family. And whenever I asked about holidays or childhood memories, he'd find a way to deflect. A joke, a shrug, a change of topic. Still, when we were together, those questions faded. Because he made me feel like I was the center of his gravity. Like every word, every glance was just for me. He wrote me letters, not emails, not texts, actual handwritten letters. I kept them in a shoebox under my bed, each one folded carefully, as if the paper itself might crumble from how much emotion it held. He'd write about the future, about how he wanted a small house with lots of windows, how he wanted to wake up next to someone he could trust, how he dreamed of raising kids who weren't afraid to cry. He told me he loved me, the first time, in a letter. 3 words written in blue ink, barely visible beneath a doodle of a coffee mug. And when I looked up at him after reading it, he just nodded. Quiet, software, like he wasn't asking me to say it back. He was just letting me know in the only way he could. I said it anyway, because I meant it. I was all in. Even if I didn't know what I was walking into, even if a part of me was already bracing for the fall. But at the time, I believed in us. I believed that whatever storm was waiting, we could weather it. Because isn't that what love is? Not perfect, not easy, but willing. Willing to stay, willing to try, willing to fight. But sometimes, the fight isn't between two people. It's between the world they want and the one that refuses to let them have it. The signs were small at first, little cracks in the surface, tiny pauses in his stories, moments when his phone would light up with a name he never explained, and he'd let it ring until the screen went dark again. At first, I told myself it didn't matter, that whatever his past was, whatever pressures he was facing, he'd tell me when he was ready. But love makes you sensitive, not just to what's said, but to what's missing. One night, I asked him, not accusing, not prying, just curious, does your family know about me? He looked away, and in that silence, my heart started writing stories I didn't want to believe. They wouldn't understand, he said quietly, then added, it's complicated. I wanted to ask, why? Why wouldn't they understand someone who loved him, who saw him, who cared enough to wait in silence for the truth? But I didn't push, because I was afraid of the answer. Still, the air between us shifted after that. A kind of tension lingered, like we were holding hands across a growing fault line. One evening, I caught him staring at me. We were on the rooftop of my apartment building, watching the city lights blink to life. What? I asked, smiling. He shook his head, then whispered, almost too softly to hear. I wish things were different. I laughed it off. made a joke about time machines, but deep down, I felt it. He was slipping, like sand through my fingers, no matter how tightly I tried to hold on. Then came the messages. Late-night texts he wouldn't explain, phone calls he took in the hallway, and once, when I woke up to find him sitting alone on the edge of the bed, his face in his hands, I realized something had changed. He was scared. Not of me, but of something bigger, something looming just out of sight. I told myself to wait, to trust. That love, real love, was patient. But even patience has a heartbeat, and mine was starting to skip, because love doesn't hide. Love doesn't turn away when it matters most. And yet, every day, I felt him getting quieter, further, like he was preparing me for something he didn't know how to say. The fight wasn't loud. There were no broken plates, no yelling, no storming out the door. It was quieter than that. And somehow, that made it worse. It started with a question. A simple one. Why do you always leave when your phone rings? He froze, just for a second, then looked down, like the floor might offer him an escape. I don't want to talk about this right now, he said. But I did, because the silence was starting to scream, and I couldn't keep pretending that nothing was unraveling between us. It matters to me, I said gently. I need to understand what's going on. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in fear, like he was holding back something too heavy to name. You don't get it, he whispered. Then help me get it, I pleaded. And then, it slipped out. My family doesn't approve of us. Just like that. The words hit the room like a cold gust of wind. I blinked. What do you mean, doesn't approve? He looked at me. Really looked. Eyes full of something that felt like shame. They think you're not from the right background, that you don't fit. They have plans for me, expectations. I stared at him, my chest suddenly tight, like my lungs forgot how to breathe. What expectations? He looked away again. They've picked someone for me, someone whose family has connections, someone who matches their world. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because everything I feared, everything I had tried so hard to ignore, was now standing between us. I didn't ask for this, he said, voice cracking. I didn't want this life. But if I walk away from them, I lose everything. I shook my head, not in anger, in disbelief. Then lose it. The words came out before I could stop them. Because love, real love, should never feel like a transaction. But he just sat there, silent, torn between two lives. And the one he had with me wasn't the one his family had chosen. I just need time, he said finally. But we both knew. Time was not on our side. And in that quiet living room, with no raised voices, no dramatic exits, we had our first real fight. And maybe our last. He invited me to a family gathering. I didn't expect it. Not after the fight. Not after the truth cracked open like that. But he said, "Come, just be with me. I want them to see you." And maybe, just maybe, a part of me hoped this was his way of choosing me. I spent hours getting ready, not to impress them, but to remind myself that I belonged anywhere I chose to be. When we arrived, the house was a mansion, not just big, intimidating. Every room felt like it had rules, like you couldn't sit just anywhere, couldn't speak too loud, couldn't laugh too freely. He held my hand at first, but as people trickled in, aunts, uncles, advisors, someone's cousin from overseas, he let go. I became the girl, not his girlfriend, not someone to welcome, just a presence. They looked at me the way you might glance at a scratch on a mirror. Not furious, just disapproving. His mother was polite, painfully so. Every word dipped in sugar and laced with steel. "It's so lovely to meet someone different," she said, smiling without blinking. His father didn't say much at all, but I noticed the way his eyes skimmed over me like I wasn't worth processing. I tried to smile, to hold conversations, tried not to flinch when someone mentioned the right kind of partner, or matching ambitions, or people who understand our world. Every word was a thread tugging me further out of the fabric of that room. I found Caleb in the kitchen. He looked pale, tense. "I told you," he said quietly. "They're never going to accept this." "But do you?" I asked. "Do you accept me?" He looked at me then, and I saw the weight in his eyes. Not just pressure, but fear, guilt. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back, because something in me realized this wasn't about them anymore. This was about him, and whether he was brave enough to want a life that didn't come pre-approved. We left early. He apologized in the car, said it wasn't fair, said he was trying. But the thing is, love doesn't always lose because of hate. Sometimes it breaks under the weight of silence, of indecision, of fear. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling wondering, what happens when someone loves you, but not enough to fight for you? The ultimatum came 2 days later. I could feel it in the way he walked into the room. Heavy, slow, like someone carrying a truth they didn't want to say out loud. He sat on the edge of my bed, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the floor. "They gave me a deadline," he said. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just listened, because I already knew. "If I stay with you..." He swallowed hard. "My parents will cut me off. No trust, no backing, no place in the company, nothing." I nodded slowly, not because I understood, but because I had no words to offer back. He continued, "They said I'm being reckless, that love doesn't build legacies, that emotions are distractions." His voice cracked on the last word. I told them I needed time, that this isn't about rebellion or pride, it's about you, about us. I finally looked at him. His face was pale. His hands shook. He wasn't bluffing. This was real, and he was torn in half. "Do you want to leave me?" I asked gently. No accusation, just clarity. He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes. And I could feel it, the war inside him. He loved me, but he'd been raised in a world where love came second to strategy, where marriage was a contract, not a connection. And me? I was the risk, the wild card, the woman he adored, but who didn't come with a pedigree. They said if I walk away, I'll regret it forever. His voice was barely above a whisper. "And if you walk away from me," I said, "you might still regret it. Just in a different way." The room was quiet. Heavy, no screaming, no ultimatums from me. I wouldn't force him to choose. Because the truth was, I didn't want to be chosen out of guilt. I wanted to be chosen out of conviction. "I love you," he said, "more than anything." And I believed him. But love, I was learning, isn't always enough when the world is standing in the doorway telling you to let go. He left a few hours later, said he needed space to think. I watched him walk down the hall, his shoulders hunched, like the decision was already eating him alive. And I stood there, wrapped in silence, waiting for a door to close that I wasn't sure would ever open again. We tried to fight it. For weeks after that conversation, he showed up more often, more intentional, more present. He brought me coffee every morning, held my hand like it anchored him, kissed me like it might be the last time, every time. It felt like he had made his choice, like we were going to run, not away from responsibility, but towards something that was ours. We talked about moving, quietly, just the two of us, far enough that the world he came from wouldn't follow, a place where no one knew his last name, where love didn't need permission. He found a small cottage listing near a quiet lake. I applied for remote work. He looked into freelance consulting. We were planning a life together that didn't require approval to exist. But something felt fragile, like every plan was written in pencil, like we were drawing our future on glass. He would hold me close at night, but sometimes I'd wake up and find him sitting by the window, just staring at his phone. Never checking it, just staring, like he was waiting for something he didn't want to receive. One morning, I found a letter on my kitchen table. Not from him. From his father. It had been slipped under the door. Typed. Cold. Precise. It didn't threaten. Not directly. It simply outlined numbers. Trusts. Contracts. Family obligations. And how one wrong decision could permanently alter everything. There was a line near the end I'll never forget. Caleb, emotions are fleeting. Legacy is permanent. When I showed it to him that evening, his hands trembled. His eyes didn't leave the page. This is what I'm up against, he whispered. But I was already beginning to understand. It wasn't about the money, or the business, or even the arranged match. It was about identity, about who he was without all of it. And I think he didn't know. I think he was afraid to find out. Still, I held on to hope. Because he was here. He was fighting, wasn't he? We booked a weekend trip, just the two of us. No phones, no plans. Just us. Somewhere quiet. It was supposed to be the beginning of everything new. But the night before we left, he didn't show up. No message, no call, nothing. I sat on my porch, backpack by my feet, watching the stars fade into morning. And in that still, bitter silence, I knew. He was gone. He didn't say goodbye. Not a word, not a note, not even a lie to soften the blow. Just silence. I called. No answer. Texted. No response. His number stopped ringing after a few days. Voicemail changed, then nothing at all. I tried not to panic. Told myself maybe something happened. An emergency. Something. Anything. Other than the truth I was beginning to feel in my bones. But deep down, I knew. He had chosen. And it wasn't me. The first few days were a blur. I went through motions I didn't remember. Ate food that had no taste. Spoke to people and forgot what I said the moment I said it. The pain wasn't sharp. It was slow, heavy, like a dull ache behind my ribs that never left. I kept the shoebox of letters. Couldn't bring myself to open it. But I couldn't throw it away either. I slept in his sweatshirt for weeks. It stopped smelling like him after the 10th wash. But I wore it anyway, like a shield or a wound. My friends tried. They brought wine, movies, endless reassurances that I deserved better. But no one understood. He hadn't cheated. He hadn't lied to my face. He just left. And somehow that felt worse, because it made me question everything. Was any of it real? Had I imagined the softness in his voice, the way he looked at me when I wasn't watching? The plans, the dreams, the some days? Was I just a chapter he knew he couldn't finish? One afternoon, weeks later, I found myself back in the bookstore. Same aisle, same shelf. The book we both reached for that day was still there, still dusty, still waiting. I picked it up, ran my fingers over the cover, and I cried, quietly, between memoir and mythology, because this wasn't just grief, it was absence, a love that didn't get to end. It just stopped, no explanation, no closure, just echoes, and I realized, sometimes the cruelest kind of goodbye is the one that never comes. It was a rainy morning, weeks, maybe months later, when someone knocked on my door. Not a delivery, not a friend, just unexpected. I opened it to find a young woman, barely older than me, holding a box wrapped in brown paper. She looked nervous, like she didn't know if she should be there, like she might run. "Are you?" she asked, saying my name carefully. I nodded. "Can I help you?" She looked down at the box, then back up at me. "I'm Caleb's sister." The name hit me like cold wind. Everything inside me paused. She held out the box. "He asked me to give this to you, eventually." "Eventually?" I asked. She hesitated. "He couldn't do it himself. He wasn't strong enough." I didn't know what that meant. Didn't want to know. She didn't stay. Just handed it over and whispered, "I'm sorry." I closed the door and stared at the box. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like it carried weight I wasn't ready for. I didn't open it right away. It sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. 3 nights. Just waiting. On the 4th night, I lit a candle. turned off the overhead lights, and carefully peeled back the tape. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me, none sent. The first was dated 2 days after our last fight. His handwriting, still neat, still familiar. The words shaky in some places, crossed out in others. I couldn't breathe after I left. I sat in my car for hours. I wanted to come back, but I didn't know how. Each letter was a confession, a window into his fear, his guilt, his love. He hadn't stopped caring. He hadn't forgotten. He had written every time he wanted to reach out, but didn't. Some were long, some only a few lines, but every single one ended the same way. I love you. I'm sorry. And one letter, near the bottom of the stack, was different. Folded in half, on thicker paper. It read, "If you're reading this, I've already lost you. But please know, it was never because I didn't love you. I just didn't know how to love you, bravely." I sat there in the dim light, the candle flickering, tears tracing down my cheeks. Not because the pain came back, but because I finally understood. He had loved me, but he hadn't known how to fight for me. And love without courage is just a promise never kept. After the letters, something shifted inside me. Not instantly, not dramatically, but slowly, like the tide easing back from a broken shore. I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel closure, but I felt seen. At last. And for a long time, that was enough. I kept the box, but I didn't reread the letters, not right away. I let them live there quietly, a reminder that it had meant something, that it wasn't all in my head. I started putting myself back together, piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, painted the wall we once sat against, donated the sweatshirt I used to sleep in. Little acts of reclaiming my space, my breath, myself. And then, life moved on. The seasons changed, as they always do. And so did I. There were new people, new conversations, some gentle, some forgettable. None quite like him. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping he'd walk through the door. Because he already had, in every page of those letters. And he had already said what I needed to hear. Still, the universe has a strange sense of timing. Years later, I had just stepped into the hospital lobby, waiting for a friend who had just had her baby. And then, I saw him. Not across a candlelit room, not on a rainy sidewalk, but under fluorescent lights, in a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and hope. He looked older, more tired, but still, him. And beside him, holding his hand tightly, was a small girl with curly dark hair and a stuffed giraffe. He didn't see me at first, and I almost turned away. Almost walked out the sliding doors and let the moment pass. But something made me stay. When his eyes finally landed on mine, everything stopped, just for a second. No rush, no drama, just stillness. We walked toward each other like we were approaching a memory. One step, then another. When we stopped, he offered a soft smile. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. We didn't say much. Didn't need to. He glanced at the little girl. "She's mine," I smiled. "She's beautiful." He looked down at her, and something warm flickered in his eyes. "I never forgot you," he said quietly. "I know." And in that small hallway, surrounded by strangers, a past love and a present life stood side by side. There was no bitterness, no regret, just understanding. Because some people leave, and some people stay. And some come back only to show you how far you've come without them. We sat for a few minutes in the hospital cafe. Nothing fancy. A table by the window. 2 coffees that neither of us touched. The little girl, her name was Ava, was off with her grandmother. Just for a moment. Just long enough for us to talk. As adults. As people who had been through the fire and come out changed. He looked thinner, more weathered, but in a way that suggested growth, not just wear. I asked him how life had turned out, not sarcastic, not bitter, just curious. He told me he did end up walking away. Not from me, but from them. Not long after he left, He realized the life they offered was a cage made of polished steel. "It looked beautiful," he said, "but I couldn't breathe." He said he went to therapy, started over, moved cities, cut ties he once thought were unbreakable, and then he met Ava's mom. Briefly, intensely. She passed away a year after Ava was born. He raised her alone. There was pain in his voice when he said it, but also pride. Like life had humbled him and handed him something to fight for. "I thought about you," he said, "more times than I can count." I nodded. "I know. I read every letter." He looked surprised, then grateful. "I was a coward," he said. "You were everything I wanted. I just wasn't ready to want you out loud." I smiled gently. That was a different time. We were different people. Silence sat between us again. But it was a comfortable silence this time, the kind that doesn't demand anything. "You seem good," he said. "I am," I replied. "Not perfect, but good." And I meant it, because I had built a life from the pieces he left behind, and I had made something beautiful of it. He reached across the table, not to hold my hand, but just to be close. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know that's late, but I need you to know it." "I forgave you a long time ago," I said. And I had. Because forgiveness isn't a gift for the person who hurt you. It's a release for yourself. A door you unlock so you don't have to carry their weight anymore. We talked a little longer, about books, about coffee, about Ava's obsession with dinosaurs. And when it was time to leave, we stood, looked at each other one last time, and smiled. No promises, no rekindling, just peace. A quiet end to a once loud story. That night, I walked home beneath a silver sky. The air was cool, gentle, as if the city itself had softened just for me. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I felt light. Like I had finally set down a bag I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Seeing him again hadn't reopened wounds. It had sealed them. With warmth, not bitterness. I thought of Ava's curls, the way her hand clutched his, the quiet pride in his voice when he said her name. He'd become someone else, not perfect, but grounded, rooted in something real. And me? I'd done what so many said I couldn't. I'd healed without him. I'd built a life not in spite of the loss, but through it. There had been nights when I thought I'd never feel whole again. When his absence was a shadow sitting across from me at every meal. But healing isn't sudden. It doesn't show up with fanfare. It tiptoes in, quietly, gently, in the spaces where pain used to echo. I stood on my balcony, watching the city breathe. Below, a couple laughed. Across the street, someone was playing soft jazz from a cracked window. Life was happening. Beautifully, messily, unapologetically. And I was part of it. Not broken, not waiting, not searching for what could have been. Just here, present in a way I hadn't been for years. I lit a candle, took the last of his letters, and placed them back in the box. Then tucked it into the top of my closet. Not as a shrine, not as a wound, but as a story. One that mattered, even if it didn't last. And as I climbed into bed, curled beneath warm blankets, I whispered into the quiet. I loved him. I did, but love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means letting go with grace. And now, we've reached the end. But this isn't the kind of ending where everything wraps up neatly, with vows, or second chances, or the kind of romantic timing you see in movies. This was a different kind of story. One where the person you love leaves, and you survive. One where the goodbye isn't loud. It's a slow, quiet drift you can't stop, even as you feel it happening. He told me he loved me, and I believe he did, with the kind of love that's deep, real, but not yet ready. I spent a long time thinking that meant I wasn't enough, that if I had been smarter, prettier, more patient, he would have stayed. But I've learned something I want you to remember too, if you've ever been left behind. Someone leaving doesn't mean you failed. It means they weren't ready, or willing, or strong enough to hold what you offered. And that's not your burden to carry. Love is a choice, not just once, but every day. He chose me once, and then he didn't. And I had to choose myself instead. And slowly, I did. I chose to get out of bed, to forgive, to grow, to dream again. And when I saw him, years later, I didn't feel that old ache. I felt peace, because I had already built something beautiful without him, because I had loved deeply and survived it fully. That's what I want you to take from this story tonight. You can be left and still be whole. You can lose someone and still win your life back. You can close the door on what could have been and still walk into something brighter. We don't always get the love we imagined, but we can still live a life full of love. In other forms, in other people, and most importantly, in ourselves. Thank you for sitting with me tonight, for listening, for feeling, for sharing this quiet space where stories breathe. If this touched something inside you, leave a comment. Tell me your story, or simply say hello. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, of love, loss, courage, and quiet strength, then please subscribe. It means more than you know. Until next time, take care of your heart, be kind to your past, and never forget. The ending of one story is sometimes the beginning of your own. Good night.